My guest today is a remarkable leader with an even more remarkable history. Elizabeth Tovar was born in Venezuela, educated in Florence, Italy. As a young woman, she was a semi-pro golfer. She's a pilot, a serial entrepreneur, and just about one of the most engaging and magnetic people you'll ever want to meet. In 1992, she co-founded Turenlaces International Agency in the Dominican Republic with a vision of stratifying the meeting industry in the Caribbean. In Elizabeth's own words, "What I love about the meetings industry is the economic spread that goes right down to the smallest players." Amen to that, Elizabeth. Today, Elizabeth is also the president of COCAL, C-O-C-A-L, the preeminent conference organization association of Latin America. When we last spoke, Elizabeth Tovar gave me 3 pieces of advice. DMOs must transform, tourism must be more relevant to the local economy, and we need to find the right visitors for the right reasons. Over the last 2 decades, Elizabeth built a thriving meetings practice on those tenets, and now, more than ever, they are signposts on a journey we must all take as destination organizations. Good morning, Elizabeth. How are you? Where are you? What's it like?
Good morning, David. I'm right now. I am in the Dominican Republic, and we are having a happy time because we are coming back. We're coming back. We just got news from the government that we are on phase 2. Therefore, we are opening most of the things that we have, and our meeting industry is going forward. So I'm happy.
Well, thank you. You're always happy, Elizabeth Tovar. You emanate a happiness and a joie de vivre that we all share, and it's infectious. DR has been known so well as a leisure and transient tourism destination for so long, but you saw something else. And take me back to the beginning of your whole personal journey towards the meetings industry, because you literally sat back coming out of university, out of your master's program, and thought about what you wanted to do. Why the Central Caribbean? Why the meetings industry?
Well, the Central Caribbean was because I came to play golf. And suddenly I figured out that the people here were extremely different and extremely hospitable. So I thought this was the perfect land to establish and do something different. Why the meeting industry? Well, at the time, I met a wonderful person from the Dominican Republic. She was very knowledgeable in the leisure business and the operational part of it. And she was coming out of an airline that was transforming itself, and let her go. And I said, how come you don't do something in the tourism business? At the time, I had that shadow gray area of not knowing the difference. And she said, well, let's get together. You show me how to do the business, and I'll show you what there is in tourism. But looking at the business here, I saw about 5,000 travel agencies. And I said, no, one more is not possible. So let me see what we can do. And I found in my research the meeting industry. At the time, it was not known as today. It was something very subtle 30 years ago. I think I made a mistake, but the mistake made me work harder. The mistake was that I thought about the meeting industry and getting into the meeting industry, but we had no place to gather. We had no meeting spaces. We had no convention centers. And worst of all, our investors in hotels didn't know anything about the meeting industry. So I think I made a mistake, but then the dialogue started and things started to change. And I found myself involved in this fantastic meeting industry. And in a country where there is every possibility to do whatever you want to do in the meeting industry.
So when you started Turenlaces with your partner, and what was her name again?
Her name was Maria Rosa Mela. She unfortunately she died 10 years later out of cancer, and but she left me all her knowledge. Her knowledge was impressive.
So when you and Maria start this, what year is it?
That was 1990. So it's 31 years ago. 31 years ago.
1990 sounds like a tremendously progressive time, but I have to say to you, having worked in South America through the 90s and the 2000s, two women striking out to create a new industry in a world that I'm not going to say it's completely run by men, but it was certainly dominated by men. What were you two thinking?
I don't know. I think it was, we were not thinking, really. We thought we were thinking, but it went well. It went well. And of course, there was an ingredient. She was very resilient, and so am I. So the mistake had to be corrected. So here we went.
Well, and I look back at it after many times talking to you, and I say, well, as an aviator and a golfer and a gourmand, I don't think you knew any better. You just decided you were going to zero in on this and succeed, and succeed you have. Let's talk about DR today. There is a shift towards a realization, as Morgas says, if you build a place that people want to be, then you build the places that businesses need to be. For sure, there is a meeting component that has evolved very well on the back of the leisure tourism piece. You talked about hotels and facilities. How does the makeup of the meeting resource, how has it changed over the last 15 years in Dominican Republic? There are a lot more meetings than there were in 1990s.
Well, it's wonderful to see that nowadays you have most of the hotels that are built here have convention centers, most of them, and we also have a couple of convention centers that are very appropriate for the island, because they can hold up to 3,500 people. And that's a good start. I am looking forward to seeing a convention center in the island, which I have heard that we're coming up with. So I'm very eager to see what the future is bringing us. But I think that we have sufficient space to create and to thrive on a meeting industry with what we have right now.
Well, you certainly personally have been helping drive that agenda forward since the 1990s. You're now the president of COCAL. We talked earlier, and you said you've come off a very successful and very encouraging COCAL meeting, I think in the last couple of weeks. What did you see? What's got you encouraged? What do we need to know?
Well, the first thing is that we thought we would not do it because everybody was telling us that we were crazy, that we wouldn't have anyone to assist, no one to contribute, no, and suddenly we see people getting into and joining us as with whatever. Here are the audiovisuals, here this, here that. And suddenly people like Simple View and someone, North Star and Amy Calvert and Adam Sachs and a lot of wonderful people were coming in. Even the association meeting, because we brought some medical association presidents to have a discussion with compliance. So we started seeing this little pine tree grow as a big tree, and I wouldn't say that it's that we had a huge event, but we had a quality event where the quality was brought up by the conversations, the discussions that we had, and that would certainly permeate into Latin America and to every country in Latin America. And of course, this COCAL had objectives, goals and objectives. And our goal was to educate, and that was accomplished. Our goal was to permeate the government in order to get them to see firsthand what the meeting industry represents, to leave that idea that it's only tourism and not an industry that promotes development and that really creates jobs and has an academic significance when you have meetings in the island. And so that was accomplished. And finally, we wanted to have some networking around. And I think many people benefited from the networking and the business of getting together again. So that was my measurement for success.
Okay, so let's talk briefly about getting together again. So there was some in-person meeting as well as some virtual meeting?
We had around 160 people, and which I think it's huge for the amount of reluctancy that at the beginning we had. And those 160 people were mostly PCOs, and for the first time, hoteliers. They were interested. And for the first time, government executives. So the three vice ministers were on hand, and everything just was amazingly, it worked out very well because everybody understood what this was for.
So speak to that for a second. Prior to the pandemic, I know you've worked very, very hard to build that kind of traction and alignment and to bring the right people to the table, so to speak, at COCAL. You're talking about a meeting that's happening, sort of 18, 20 months into COVID. And in a sense, the crisis has helped galvanize us and maybe even helped get the right people in the room a little more easily than before.
Yeah, you got it. It was an opportunity. It was the right opportunity at the right time, even though it was not perceived that way. But it worked that way. It worked that way. I think we got the leaders of the industry. We got them here. And we got the leaders of the government, the local government, and we got stakeholders. The whole alignment of stakeholders were here. So I think it was, that's why I call it a successful meeting in every way. But I think, yes, the pandemic was a catalyzer in this event.
Well, you talked to me, and you've talked many times in the media about this idea of tourism or the visitor economy must be relevant to the local economy. And I'm sure that was a major theme as vice ministers come together with hoteliers. We're all looking at the same thing, which is our visitor economies have been drastically altered and we want to build them back. But you also talked to me about wanting to build them back different and better. You have a vision for that. Talk to me about what you see when it comes to the visitor economy.
Well, you see, David, I think we have been blinded by the fact that we count our success on head counts. Like we're very successful because in an island of 48,000 square kilometers, we get 6 million people. But I think we have never sat back and analyzed what we're getting in return. So I think that is an important thing that we must change. We have to analyze whether we want mass tourism or we have to reevaluate our goals. And because we have such a fantastic island, because we have a fantastic product, then we have to sell it as a fantastic product. And the reevaluation of that includes the meeting industry. Why? Because I don't think we're getting what we're worth with our leisure tourism. I think that how should I put it, that it doesn't create a lot of buzz. But I think at the time of the colonies, I think the old world was willing to come here, get the products and trade them and whatever, and the new world wouldn't get too much. I think we went back to that model with the mass tourism. And what we're getting is a lot of visitors, a lot of tourists, but we're not getting the return on investment that it should be getting from that area. So what does the meeting industry represent? I'm not saying that we leave aside the tourism business. I'm just proposing another industry, an industry that can bring up an immense number of startups, an economic platform that creates a lot of return, because that is the way the model for the meeting industry works. So when I say, for example, that we're not getting sufficient return, is that, for example, when you have a vertical operation like the leisure business, and we have most of our leisure business in the Dominican Republic is from the old world. They have their own planes. They have their own hotels. They have their own tourist DMCs and whatever. And everything is invoiced in the old world, and we get only the little thing that they want to give us to pay probably the employees. Or when I'm talking about the meeting business, we're talking about an industry that mainly has to depend on the locals. So yes, everything is done, every economic move has to touch locals. And most of them are small business and medium business. And those small and medium business are mostly from women. So you are touching a huge amount of people with one simple conference.
So when I think in talking to you, I called that tourism imperialism, and you corrected me. You said it's probably more like tourism colonialism, and I very much respect that insight. I think that's completely valid. There is no question that in destinations where we don't leave enough on the table, tourism isn't sustainable. There's some great lessons out of Europe in the last decade on over tourism. Mm-hmm. But I think you've made a really interesting distinction here, which is you can have over tourism when the numbers aren't stupefying. So you can have 6 million visitors. That's a great number, but if the right kind of tourism, as you said, and you said this earlier, the right tourism for the right reasons isn't in sync with what you want for your visitor economy, then technically that's over tourism, isn't it?
It is, because after all, you're putting a number of heads. You know, I think they treat tourism as cattle ranchers. Forgive me for this. You know, you cannot count heads. You have to understand what the business is all about. And if you have a mass tourism where you're depleting the aquifers, and you're depleting your ecosystem, and you live out of that, then you should reevaluate what you want. I think we should reevaluate, first of all, the return on investment. Secondly, the damage of a mass tourism in our country. And thirdly, what is it that we're worth? So this is something to reevaluate.
Elizabeth, is that the discussion that's happening at the COCAL level? Are you talking about those things as a group of interested individuals? Are hotels looking for better yield versus more yield? Are governments looking at sustainable tourism? Or is that discussion starting? You talked about a successful COCAL. Did you
I
talk about
think
those things?
we did talk about those things, although they were focused on the meeting industry, but we did talk about that. We did talk about the meeting industry is not, we believe it's not a segment of tourism. We believe it's a business platform, which, by the way, creates a lot of tourism, but the right kind of tourism. I mean, if you get the right kind of tourism, you get all the benefits of the right kind of tourism. First, you get people that are knowledgeable, cultured, and they are willing to respect the environment. Secondly, you get a lot of money spent in the country, which creates an economic growth. Thirdly, you get knowledge because most of the people that come here are leaders of the world in their specialties, and that is transmitted directly to our own professions. So I think that one of the meeting industry is really, really industry on its own that creates tourism and not a segment of tourism.
Well, and I share that view. I would articulate it a little bit differently. I'm nowadays looking at the visitor economy and having a hard time. I'm purposefully creating for myself a hard time differentiating between the leisure traveler, the educational traveler, the business traveler. They're all visitors and they're all part of the economy. I will tell you my personal experience, especially in South America, places like Caracas, places like Bogota, places like Sao Paulo. I cannot tell you how grateful I was to be traveling as a business person because I got to see those places with an immediate clarity. When you're a business traveler, the veneer of tourism kind of goes away and you get plugged right into what people are doing, how they make their living, how cities works. And I loved for years traveling on business. I still think it's a phenomenal thing because it's so crisp. I think it's different than traveling as a leisure traveler, but at the same time, I think all of those things are part of this thing we're starting to call, the visitor economy, no matter which form it comes from. You're working hard in the meeting segment. You said you had a COCAL that was objectives focused. I know you. You're a doer. You are a great maven in terms of linking people together to start things, but you like to do. What were the priorities coming out of that meeting? What actionable things did those people go away with that we need to do in South America to realize a vision where meetings contribute to the economy the way they do in your vision?
The first thing is key. It's that you have to stop thinking individually. You have to think in cooperation with, linked to. Stop thinking individually. It doesn't pay off. And we have that model of thinking individually. So the second thing is that we have a lot of we don't like to give ideas. We are followers. We don't like to submit ideas. We might make a mistake, but we need to give ideas. We need to be disruptors. We need to get out of the box. And Latin America has been conformist. I think we have a great product. We have a great destination in Latin America with a lot of pluses, but we need to start thinking that we are great. We put ourselves down all the time. You know that, David. But once you start reshifting your mind and start thinking that we have a great product, we can learn to create that great product for the rest of the people that don't know us. So that's very a priority.
They talked a lot in the 80s and 90s about the emergence of Latin America as a global superpower in terms of innovation and ideas. And I was excited by that. And I got to spend time working in Latin America during those years. It's interesting. We seem to have shifted as a world economy back to a consumer-based economy. And the real issues we're having about world dominance are based on consumption. They're based on China and the US and the ability to create different fuel systems, but it's still consumer based. I felt back in the 90s in South America that the discussion we were having was about a greater way of being and living and doing business. And to all of our peers, anyone who spent time in the Caribbean or South America, it's a different way of life, and it's a wonderful way of life, isn't it?
It is a way of life that I like very much, but we can still shift our minds and go in a better way and still have a great life. I mean, I think we're afraid of just going out of the box. We're afraid of making our own destinations free to create. We're always following the big ones and following the other models. Why don't we create and make ourselves a unique destination with unique products? There's some Latin countries that are doing that, but I think in the majority, we still need to work a lot. And especially there's another thing that we have to work a lot with, and it's the understanding of the stakeholders. We
Right.
do not talk to each other. We do not talk sufficiently to each other. We have maybe hoteliers talking on their own, and then we have PCOs talking on their own, and the government is completely on their own. Why don't we sit down and talk to each other and make things work a lot better? I think COCAL was successful because we sat down together. We sat down together several times, and it was amazing what it made.
But I still see those. I hear you about the sort of being stuck in a rut, but I also see some great thinking coming out of Latin America. Talking to you, talking to Julian Orozco Guerrero, the Vice Minister of Tourism out of Colombia, talking to Michael Nagy at the Fairmont Copacabana. I mean, ideas like stop owning your own content. Vice Minister for Colombia is completely taken with the idea of shifting the narrative of Colombia. I mean, these are progressive people doing progressive things. That is exciting to see coming out of South America, isn't it? I think you might be able to leapfrog a lot of the destination management development that we've been sort of belly aching here for almost a decade and a half, and go right to the idea that, tourism's not about advertising. It's about creating a narrative that you share with the world that entreats people to be part of what you do. I think in some sense, if you can skip the commercial part of that, you might be able to jump ahead in the fact that a little bit like when we were working in television in South Asia in the 90s, we kept waiting for them to have cable TV, and they didn't. They skipped it. They went straight to satellite TV, and that changed the game. I think Latin America, I see you looking at the opportunities, and I'm encouraged that you look at the opportunities, and where you see vestigial things that didn't necessarily have a lot of value, then eschew them, throw them away, and move on to the things that are working. I see a lot of that.
Well, we have to find other means of developing ourselves. For example, I think we are always having a crutch, and the crutch is the government. We need to start leaving that crutch and start acting on our own with all the stakeholders and going forward. And there's a lot of crutches that don't have to be crutches. They're things that can help you out. I was talking to my friend Rebe Beriochoa the other day at COCAL, and she was explaining to me that the many options that we have, qualifying better qualifying the people that come over to the meetings, better qualifying the fam trips, getting those people the right way, sending a message and content that it's right for them. We have been going all over doing things that are not targeted to anyone. It's you cannot target the world. You have to target the market that you want and the way that you want to be seen. And I think there's a lot of that. I was talking to Claudia Davila too, and we need to shift into professional, how do you say, herramientas, tools,
Tools.
professional tools, instead of shifting always to the government tools.
Well, good. And I'm really encouraged because there is a precision and an insight that we have these days that's our choice. If we look for it, it's there. Or we can go back to a very broadcast version of sharing our story. So I'm completely encouraged by what you say. And if you're having those discussions, I would say the thing I always say that, William Gibson said so well: the future's here. It's just not very evenly distributed. Those tools are there. We can find them, we can use them, or we can go back to the plow. We can look for the tractor, or we can go back to the plow.
And there's another thing, I think most of us think that the tools are, they are out of our budget. One of the things that talking to Rebe and talking to Claudia and talking to Amy Calvert, we found out is that tools, there are a myriad of tools for every budget, but you have to grab them. Don't sit down and wait for the world to take over, because you're going to be in the end, the tail of everything. You have to be the best, and the best needs to have tools.
Well, and the tools, I would remind everyone, based on what you're saying, you may have looked at these tools 3 years ago and they were ungainly and they were difficult and maybe cost effective. The rapid pace at which we've been developing digital tools in this industry is remarkable. If you go back and look at customer relationship management software, if you go back and you look at social media targeting, if you look at assessing the strength and digital health of a destination, all of those tools are front line now, and they're in the low thousands of dollars. 4 years ago, they'd be, $10, $50, $100,000 tools. So another thing is to remember that just because you looked at those tools and they were prohibitively expensive, the pace of change in digital means the cost scale decreases on a logarithmic basis. They're probably quite a bit more affordable today than we thought they were when we looked at them 3-4 years ago.
Talking about that, there's another issue, and you were talking about immediate things to do. We need to measure the importance of the meeting industry in Latin America. It's been measured very poorly. Only a couple of countries are measuring that in a serious way. We need to measure it as a region. We need to come up with those numbers so that we can talk head to head with the government and tell them, although we're not asking for your money, we're asking for your support. And we need strategy and we need action. And the only way to ask them to do that is if we show them what the meeting industry is.
I'm so glad you brought that up, because the metrics we need, we just don't need more, we need better. And I'll tell you a great example. When we talk about the tourism economy pre-COVID, it was hard to get any sway with the argument that the tendrils of the visitor economy reached into everything. Well, when you turn the tap off and there is no more visitor, it becomes apparent very, very quickly that the visitor economy had many more opinion points in our lives, in our cities, in our civic infrastructure than we ever thought. So it's not just Latin American meetings that needs to look at those measurements. The rest of the world is hard at work looking at the same thing, saying we probably under evaluated the impact of the visitor economy. For years, I've been working with restaurants and hotels in Canada. And when you talk to them, you say, what percentage of your business do you think is visitors? And they say, I don't know, nothing, not too big, 15, 20%. But if you take an economist view, then you sit down with them and say, well, what's the profit margin of your business? Well, most restaurants will be significantly below 20% and probably well below 15%. And so you look at it and say, okay, so the visitor economy contributes an amount that's greater than your profit margin. How important is that?
And that's the reason why we have to measure. And that's the reason why we have to partner all together and contribute to that. I have to admit that we're very poor in the Dominican Republic measuring that. Even the leisure that we have been so successful, quote unquote, because of the amount of visitors we have had, we have not measured anything
Well,
that has to do with what we get from that kind of a tourism.
We're at that lucky point where we were counting money in piles instead of units.
Well, so I think that this measurement has to be seen as a tool, as a something that has to be done urgently. It's a number one priority for all of us, and for the meeting industry and for the leisure business. And once we measure, we will be able to reevaluate what our goals and objectives are.
Well, and there is a ton of data, extant data, that we can start with. We don't have to wait to develop a program tomorrow. We can go backwards and look at it with a different lens and discern a number of things that you need to know right now. So we need that measurement looking at our historicals, and we need to use that same model going forward. I totally agree. All right, we're getting to the end of this one. I want to give you a chance. I'm so sad. I am so sad. I want to give you a chance to bring up any key thoughts or ideas that have been on your head that you need to share before we finish this out. So anything you want to share, anything you want to say to your peers around the world. And remember, we are all in the same boat. And I find it helpful every day to listen to leaders around the world. Remember, they're listening to you. What do you want to share?
Well, the first thing I want to share is something that that was given to me by the Brazilian Academy of the meeting industry. The Brazilians told me, we have come to the conclusion that the meeting industry is not a segment of the leisure, the tourism. We need to convince the World Tourism Organization to change the name and to add the word meeting to their name. So World Tourism and Meeting Organization. I think it's my first proposal, because we need to get this awareness out. The second thing is that I urge the governments of Latin America to measure the meeting industry. The meeting industry is humongous. And who measures? The bigger countries. And that's why the bigger countries take good care of the meeting industry, because they know what is in store. We have to measure because it's big for us too, only that we don't know it. The third thing is professionalization. We need to get certifications. We need to study more. We need to be aware that this is a global industry, and we need to be on top of our education in order to be there. So with that, I just want to thank you, David.
So Elizabeth, I want to thank you. It's great to talk to you. You're such an incredible human being. I wish everybody could have the discussion we had about your past and what it was like to go to school and learn to fly planes in the 70s and 80s. I've met so many people around the world over the last 18 months that I would not have met if it wasn't COVID. And I got to tell you, for that, I am truly grateful. I'll tell you a funny story, though. I ended up at Destination International Annual Convention in Baltimore, and more than once met a person, had a great big hug, said, "It's great to see you." And the one young lady I was talking to said, "Do you realize we've never met in person?" And I looked at her, we just had a big hug, and I said, "You know what? It never crossed my mind." And I'm shocked. I would have thought, you would succinctly remember everybody that you met digitally and everybody you met in person, but this person was there, and I was sure until she said it. Of course, we've met in person. So I so look forward to meeting you in person. You've been an inspiration. I love the work you're doing, and I know your peers do. But that day when we can shake hands and have a cup of coffee, I'm so looking forward to that.
I'm looking forward to that too, David. I'm sure we have a lot of things to talk about. So
We
thank you
certainly
so
do.
much for this time. Thank you on behalf of COCAL, and thank you on behalf of the meeting industry.
Well, Elizabeth, thank you for everything you've done to make this a better industry. It's people like you that make this a great industry to work in. Thanks.